This is a story about Rapunzel.
There were once a man and a woman who had long in vain wished for a child. At the length the woman hoped that God was about to grant her desire. These people had a little window at the back of their house from which a splendid garden could be seen, which was full of the most beautiful flowers and herbs ever. It was, however, surrounded by a high wall, and no one dared go into it, because it belonged to an enchantress, who had great power and was dreaded by the world. One day the woman was standing by this window and looking down into the garden, when she saw a bed, which was planted with the most beautiful rampion ever, and it looked so fresh and green, and she so longed for it, and had the greatest desire to eat some. This desire increased every day as she knew that she could not get any of it. She quite pined away and looked pale and miserable. Then her husband was alarmed and asked, "What aileth thee, dear wife?" "Ah," she replied, "if I can get any of this rampion, which is in the garden behind our house to eat, I shall die." The man who loved her thought, "Sooner than let my wife die, bring her some of that rampion myself, let it cost what it will." In the twilight of the evening, he clambered down over the wall into the garden of the enchantress, hastily clutched a handful of rampion and took it to his wife. She at once made herself a salad of it, and ate it with much relish. She, however, liked it so much, so very, very much, that the next day she longed for it 3 times as much as before. If he was to have any rest, her husband must once more descend into the garden in the gloom of the evening, and therefore he let himself down again. But when he clambered down the wall, he was terribly afraid, as he saw the enchantress standing before him. "How canst thou dare," said she with an angry look, "to descend into my garden and steal my rampion like a thief? Thou shalt halt and suffer for it."
"Ah," answered he, "let mercy take the place of justice. I only made up my mind to do it out of necessity. My wife saw your rampion from the window and felt such a longing for it that she would have to die if she had not got some to eat."
Then the enchantress allowed her anger to be softened and said to him, "If the case as thou says, I will allow thee to make away with it, as thou rampion. If the case as thou sayest, I will allow thee to take away with thee as much rampion as thou wilt. Only I make one condition. Thou must give me the child, which thou wilt wife into the world. It shall be well treated and I will care for it like a mother." The man in his chair consented to everything, and when the woman was brought to bed, the enchantress appeared at once, gave the child the name of Rapunzel, and took it away with her. Rapunzel grew into the most beautiful child underneath the sun. When she was 12 years old, the enchantress shut her into a tower which lay in a forest, and had neither stairs nor doors, but quite at the top was a little window. When the enchantress wanted to go in, she placed herself beneath it and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, lay your hair down to me." Rapunzel had magnificent long hair, fine as spun gold, and when she heard the voice of the enchantress, she unfastened her braids tresses, wound them round one of the hooks above the window, and the hair fell 20 ells down, and the enchantress climbed up by it. After a year or two it came to pass that the king's son rode through the forest and went by the tower. Then he heard a song which was so charming that he stood still and listened. This was Rapunzel, who in her solitude passed her time in letting her sweet voice resound. The king's son wanted to climb up to her and look for the door of the tower, but none was to be found. He rode home, but singing had got so deeply touched his heart that every day he went out to the forest and listened to it. Once, when he was thus standing behind a tree, he saw that an enchantress came there, and he heard her cry, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair."
"If that is the ladder by which one mounts, I will try once for my fortune," said he. And the next day, when it began to grow dark, he went into the tower and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let your hair down to me." Immediately the hair fell down and the king's son climbed up. At first Rapunzel was terribly frightened when such a man as her eyes as the lover yet beheld came to her. But the king's son began to talk to her quite like a friend, and told her that his heart had been so stirred that it let him have no rest, and he had been forced to see her,
Then Rapunzel lost her fear, and when he asked her if she would take him for her husband, and she saw that he was young and handsome, she thought, he would love me more than Dom Gato will. And she said yes, and laid her hand in his. She said, I will willingly go away with thee, but I do not know how to get down. Bring with thee a skein of silk every time that thou comest, and I will weave a ladder with it. And when that is ready, I will descend, and thou wilt take me on my horse. They agreed that until that time he should come to her every evening, for the old woman came by day. The enchantress remarked nothing of this until Rapunzel said to her, Tell me, Dame Gothel, how is it happens that you were so much heavier meat to drop than that young king's son? He is with me in a moment.
Ow, thou wicked child,
cried the enchantress.
What do I hear thee say? I thought I had separated thee from all the world, and yet thou hast deceived me.
In her anger, she clutched Rapunzel's beautiful tresses, wrapped them twice round her left hand, seized a pair of scissors with the right, and snip, snap, they were cut off. And the lovely braids lay on the ground, and she was so pitiless that she took poor Rapunzel into a desert where she had to live in great grief and misery. On the same day, however, that she cast out, Rapunzel, the enchantress, in the evening fastened the braids of her hair, which she had cut off, to hook up to the window. And when the king's son came and cried, Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair, she let the hair down. The king's son ascended, but he did not find his dearest Rapunzel above, but the enchantress, who gazed at him with wicked and venomous looks.
Aha!
She cried mockingly,
Thou would fetch thy dearest, but the beautiful bird's no longer singing in the nest. The cat has got it and will scratch out thy eyes as well. Rapunzel is lost to thee. Thou will never see her any more.
The king's son was beside himself with pain, and in his despair he leapt down from the tower. He escaped with his life, but the thorns into which he fell pierced his eyes. Then he wandered quite blind around the forest, ate nothing but roots and berries, and did nothing but lament and weep across the loss of his dearest wife. Thus he roamed around in misery for some years, and at the length came to a desert where Rapunzel, with the twins she had given birth to, a boy and a girl, lived in wretchedness. He heard a voice, and it seemed so familiar to him that he went towards it. And when he had approached, Rapunzel knew him, and fell on his neck and wept. Two of her tears wetted his eyes, and they grew clear again, and he could see with them as before. He led them to his kingdom, where he has joyfully received, and they lived a long time afterwards, happy and contented.
And Rapunzel let down the braids of her hair, and the enchantress climbed up to her.